Good evening, everybody. It is Sunday the 20th at 7:01. And like it says in the bottom left-hand side corner over here, there, I'm Seth Eisenberg. And this is the conservative corner, so hopefully you're in the right place. If you're not, I can't help you. I don't know where you're supposed to be. But here you are, so you might as well stay. We got a pretty big show today. Got a pretty good guest. So what I want to do is we're going to go through the breaking news and the important news that's happened. Then we're going to get right into that. So this is not what I'm going to cover first. Really, isn't important news. It's more breaking, and I think it's funny to me, but it may not be funny to you, or I don't know. So I don't know if you heard about it, but Stephen Colbert, his show's been canceled in 2026, and of course everybody's screaming and crying that hey, he's getting canceled because he's anti-Trump, and that's the only reason he's gone. And what all the other late night talking heads are concerned now. It's like Jon Stewart said, he's afraid he's going to get canceled, and the other morons that are out there are afraid they're going to get canceled. And my answer to them, it's got nothing to do with making fun of Trump. The problem is you're not funny. And your shtick is old. You do the same thing every show, month after month, year after year. It gets old after a while, man. You're not funny. You're old. You're old news. You got to get some fresh stuff, or if not, they're going to cancel you. Trust me, if you were making money, CBS wouldn't cancel you regardless of who didn't like you. So obviously you stopped being funny. Your viewership is down. Your shtick is getting old. So they're getting rid of you, and they're going to find somebody that's funny. I don't, and I understand for some of these people being told you're not good anymore probably gives them a little butt hurt, but it's the facts. If you were making money, you'd still be there. Obviously you're not making money because you're not funny, so they're cutting you. Suck it up, Buttercup. I heard Walmart's hiring. You'd probably make a really good door greeter. Now this is big news. Apparently, they've done an investigation and found out that Obama's administration had manufactured intelligence, as it says, and to create the 2016 Russia interference narrative for Trump, try to get him in trouble. More and more is coming out, so it seems more than just a BS story. It seems legitimate, and everybody's saying, well, they got to arrest this guy. He's got to go to jail. And like I've said before, these people don't go to jail. The higher you get in that political food chain, the less and less you're held accountable for till you get to a point where they're not going to do anything to you. And number two, he's a Democrat. They don't get held accountable for anything. They can pretty much do what they want to do, and nothing happens to them. It's just the way it goes. What I like to see him, if this comes out to be true and they can back it up with facts, and and there's enough for an arrest or charges, I hope there is a charge. I hope he is arrested. I hope everybody involved is arrested. Just like I would say if it were the other way around and Republicans were doing this to a Democrat, I hope they get arrested and charged. I'm not going to hold my breath. And I'm not going to bet the house anything happens to anybody. But this kind of just solidifies how low the left will go to stay in control. They say absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we're seeing that now. Do I believe it happened? Yeah. I'm not surprised. This is my shocked face when it comes to anything the Democrats do. It doesn't surprise me. I don't think they're above doing anything at this point. They've pretty much shown themselves for who they are, and that's what they are. Moving along, like I said, we got an important show going on. We three officers were killed in an explosion at an East LA training facility Friday morning. This is one of them, Detective Victor Lemus, and I hope I didn't kill his last name because that would be not my intention. The incident, which was believed to be an accident, was reported around 7:30 a.m. at the Biscalu's training facility at the 1000 block of Northeast Avenue, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department said. The compound housed the Sheriff's Department's Special Enforcement Units and Bomb Squad. Multiple law enforcement sources briefed on the investigation told the news that it appears the explosives the deputies were handling had been brought back to the facility from a seemingly routine bomb squad call out and believed to have been inert when they exploded. I believe it was some hand grenades they found. And obviously they went off, and these three officers, these three detectives lost their lives. And here's one of them. Detective William Osborne was the second one. And we have Detective Joshua Kelly Uckland was the third detective that was killed in the explosion. And our hearts go out to their families. It's horrible what happened. It's a horrible accident. And they will be missed, I'm sure, by their family and friends and by the community that they served. It's always hard to lose people when it's an accident. It's never easy and nothing makes sense. We just can't say, oh well, they're all police officers that they know the risk when they take the job. It still doesn't make it easy. It still doesn't make it okay. It still doesn't make it all right. It's a horrible way, and I hope their families are being taken care of by the department and the community that they're in. And I mean, I don't want to keep talking about it because it's a sad thing. There's 3 people lost their lives, 3 families are changed, and the department is going to be reeling from this for a while. I feel sorry for all of them. So let's get off the bad news and get into the main part of the show. I'm getting ready to bring on Chris Burnett. He's running for Congressional District 6 here in Maryland. So if you live in Maryland, this is going to be an important show. And if you don't live in Maryland, it's still important to hear what candidates have to say. Because like I always say, you should always support the most conservative candidate you can find, regardless of where they're at. I mean, we need to take control of this country before it gets worse. I mean, before riots start happening everywhere, before law enforcement is ignored everywhere, before it just goes into complete chaos, we need to start to rein these things in. And like I've said, Trump is one person. Trump can't do it by himself. He can't. And he's only got 3 years, so we need to get him as much help as we can. So Chris Burnett is a devoted husband, father of 4, and a proven leader with a lifelong commitment to serving our country. For 22 years, Chris served in the United States Marine Corps, where he led Marines in combat zones, advised senior commanders on complex legal and national security issues, and shaped foreign policy from the Pentagon to the front lines. A decorated Marine Corps officer and legal scholar, Chris's career reflects dedication, integrity, and a relentless focus on mission success. Whether deployed in Iraq or stationed in the U.S. Southern Command and Marine Forces Cyberspace Command, he earned a reputation for sound judgment, strategic thinking, and results-driven leadership. Now, Chris is ready to bring the same leadership and accountability to Congress. As a candidate for Maryland's 6th Congressional District, he's running to restore trust in government and fight for the issues that matter most to hardworking Maryland families. His priorities are tackle the cost of living, lower taxes for families and small businesses, protect parental rights and education, rebuilding and investing in infrastructure, expanding access to quality health care, standing strong with our police, military, and veterans, cutting waste and working towards national deficit elimination, securing the border and enforcing immigration laws, and advancing a strong military and foreign policy to keep America safe. Chris Burnett is not a politician. He's a battle-tested leader who believes in accountability, integrity, and opportunity. He's ready to serve again, this time in Washington. So let's go ahead and bring him on and get this show rolling. There he is. How you doing, Chris?
Good, Seth. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And whenever I have a guest, I always say this to everybody who's going to be watching this now or later. Just because I say something doesn't mean Chris agrees with it and adheres to what I say. And the same thing, he may say something I don't agree with and don't adhere to. So please don't put my words in his mouth and say, well, Seth said this and he must agree. It's not the case. He's here because I want to hear what he has to say, and so do you. He doesn't have to agree with everything I say. That's fine. And I'm also going to put this out there now. I was in the Navy. He was in the Marines. So I'm going to give him a hard time once in a while. I'm going to call him a crayon eater. I'm going to talk slow and use small words. But I can do that because I was in the service. So I can give him a hard time. If you weren't, you can't. It's just how it goes.
Beat me to it. I was going to start making jokes about the Navy. But all right.
I wouldn't have it any other way. It's just how it's got to be.
It.
All right. So I read your bio. Is there anything you want to add to that? I mean, anything else people should know about you other than what's there?
Well, I'm sure we're going to cover a lot of ground. I was actually going to start with your intro. I can't get over how sad it is to hear that those 3 officers were killed. I've said it before, being deployed in combat, there's uncertainty. There's a lot of catastrophic consequences to decision-making, but at least you knew that there was an enemy and you knew how to respond to it. And you usually knew which direction to face. I have a tremendous amount of respect for law enforcement because they leave their home, their wife, their kids, their family, and they go out every single day to an unknown environment. And in this case, it appeared as though they were just trying to dispose of what they thought were inert hand grenades.
Yes.
And then by a sheer randomness, they found themselves in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. So my heart goes out to those families. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for law enforcement because, like I said, the uncertainty that I faced was baked into where I was sent to. I couldn't imagine every single day not knowing what I was going to confront and then coming home that same day to spend the evening or overnight with my family. So tremendous, tremendous loss. And I'm glad you highlighted their sacrifice.
Yeah, my father was a police officer in PG County for 20 years, and I could remember him going to work and my mom just watching him pull down the driveway. And I knew, and then it didn't make sense to me. Now it does. I knew she was thinking, could this be the last time I see him? Is he not going to come home? Or something on the news would pop up, officer shooting in PG County. She would be glued to that TV the entire night, waiting to see who it was or waiting for a phone call. So yeah, it's a tough job. And anytime something happens to an officer, it's horrible because, like you said, they go out planning on coming home, and they don't expect not to. So it's rough when it happens, especially like you said, the training or an incident where it should not have happened, like this.
Yeah. Now the other thing you mentioned in your opening, I've been trying to take CD6 and make it a national race for two reasons. One, April Delaney is very wealthy. She's going to put $5-6 million of her own money into this race. So if we're going to beat her, we're going to have to raise an enormous amount of money to retake CD6. And what I've said in the past, to make Western Maryland red again. I mean, this district had been gerrymandered out of being a Republican stronghold. And if we're going to take it back, we're going to need a tremendous amount of money. The other part of that we have to be aware of is if we want to maintain or enhance our majority in the House, if we want to codify a lot of the progress we've seen over the last 6 months, we're going to need to have that majority. And normally the party in power suffers a loss at the midterm elections. So I've been trying to get people out and excited both across the district, across Maryland, and then more importantly, across the entire country to support our race in CD6 to win and to win decisively so that we can go to DC with a mandate to look out for Western Maryland's interests in a way that they haven't been for over 10 years.
That brings up a question I wanted to ask. How do you get Republicans excited here? Has that been a challenge for you? Are they responding to that, or is it kind of difficult to get them worked up and ready to go?
I think everybody wants to be heard and everybody wants to be seen. And I hate to say that I think some folks have almost come to expect losing. And it's in part because Maryland is a very blue state.
Yep.
And I think and in some folks, they've developed sort of an opposition mindset where they will put out a candidate and we will, hold them to task and force them into issues and make them commit to a position, but we don't actually expect to win. What I've been trying to get out and do is to convince people, if we get behind this early and we push in one direction, and that is the direction of winning, we can win this. We just have to make sure that we focus on winning CD6 and not just pointing out how bad the Democrats have done and how little Delaney has done for CD6.
Looking back on the last election that she won and trying to remember what I can recall, I do remember her being out in Western Maryland very few times, out towards Cumberland and that area. And I think if someone can reach out to that area and connect, I think that will flip. Have you spent a lot of time out that way, getting to know those people out there, and how's that working?
And for a couple of reasons. When I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, okay. So when I go out to Allegheny in Garrett, that actually reminds me a lot of where I grew up in terms of the rolling hills and somewhat of a slightly, where I grew up was slightly rural or, outside of the city. And so I go out there and it's a very familiar area. A lot of people out there are Steelers fans, which again is near and dear to my heart, having grown up in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
But the other part about Allegheny and Garrett that's interesting is everybody will say, well, they're very much, Republican counties. You're going to win those counties, but we actually need to win them by a much larger margin.
Oh yeah.
Because every additional vote that we get in Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington County, that will offset a vote in Montgomery or potentially in Frederick, because you have a Democrat majority. Mm-hmm. So it's more than just winning the county. It's about the number of votes that you can get that you can have counted. So we're in the process right now of working with the clubs out there to push doing a lot of phone calls, doing some door knocking, and then a direct mail campaign for folks that maybe can't get to the polls. We're encouraging them to get on that permanent mail-in ballot registry, mm-hmm. so that by the time the primary hits, that ballot will be in their mailbox. And then by the time the general election hits in November, the ballot will be in their mailbox. And these are votes that we can essentially rely on. These are Republican strongholds. We just have to make sure that every vote is counted and that every person that can vote does vote.
What is since you've been out there? What seems to be their big concern out there in Western Maryland? What is their big focus? What are they coming to you with? What seems to be their issues out there?
Well, I think first and foremost, they want infrastructure. They want to have the ability to have an economy that's thriving, and oftentimes that's wholly dependent on infrastructure, whether it's roads or other forms of infrastructure. Rural broadband. They want to have better internet access. I don't think in some places they weren't able to take advantage of the remote work boom because there wasn't strong enough internet connection. Okay. And then when you talk to folks, they would welcome data centers out there. They're close to both Pennsylvania and West Virginia. They have access to power coming across the state line. You could have a potential for data centers out there. So they want to have a better economy. They want better infrastructure. They're looking for that stronger rural broadband, and then ultimately better access to healthcare and jobs. I think they're being smothered right now under taxes and over-regulation. And if we can lower that tax burden and we can create opportunity, those areas will thrive.
Do you get the impression that they feel like they're ignored out there by politicians?
100%. Not only ignored, but almost forgotten. In fact, Garrett and Allegheny, I think it's in the Pittsburgh market. So in other words, they don't even get DC news, DC information. They're actually more closely aligned to Pittsburgh because that's the market that they get in terms of TV and radio coverage.
Oh, wow.
So what I've said before is I would want to put a congressional office as far out there as I could so that people in Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington have direct access to a congressional office. And then if we can push more opportunity and infrastructure to bolster that economy, that's going to be a top priority.
Yeah, I've always got the impression that I can understand that they would feel ignored out there. I mean, you go from Frederick, Hagerstown, then boom, it's nothing. You get a little bit of Hancock, and then it's nothing again until you get out towards Cumberland. So I can completely understand that they're feeling ignored. I would too out that way. Let me ask you this: you served 22 years in the Marine Corps. You led Marines and advising on foreign policy and national security. How do you feel your military experience will shape your approach to representing diverse needs of Maryland's 6th District?
And that's a great question. And that's really my job over the next year is articulating what I did in the Marine Corps and the value that's going to be to individual voters. And I'll start with the Marine Corps is a phenomenal organization. I loved every minute that I spent on active duty. The two really important lessons that they teach every single Marine, and that's accountability and integrity. So everything that I did started with a basic sense of personal accountability, professional responsibility, and ultimately your job is to set the conditions for other people to succeed. And then if you want people to follow you, it's not about rank and it's not about position. It's about trust. And in the Marine Corps, you foster that through transparency. So you work on creating as simple a solution as possible and to make it as clear as possible. And you earn that by maintaining absolute integrity in everything that you do. So I would take those two intangibles that have been fostered over the last 22 years and then apply them to the complex problems that we confront at a national level. Now, while I was on active duty, I had the benefit of serving at every echelon of command, whether it was as a company commander in Iraq, advising a combatant commander at U.S. Southern Command, or reviewing legislation in National Defense Authorization Act and policy at the Pentagon. I've had a chance to experience some very complicated issues, working with an enormous number of people across multiple agencies, and then having to solve that problem and foster a positive outcome. So I think those skills of really digging into complex problems and distilling out a solution, leading planning teams, making decisions in very difficult and stressful situations as far as combat and deployed scenarios, I think that uniquely qualifies any veteran. And I can only speak to my personal experience that I want to bring that same approach of selfless service to set the conditions for all of the citizens of CD6 to do well as my priority. And I think it starts with personal accountability to voters, and then maintaining complete transparency throughout this campaign and any time I would spend in Washington.
And I think you kind of touched on it, and I want to bring it back up a little bit more. I don't think when people understand what it comes. I was in the military. I wasn't an officer. I was an E4. I had a few guys under me, and I was top secret radio communications. But I think what people also fail to realize when it comes to any level in the military, of course, as you get higher, it becomes a little bit more easy to do, and it becomes second nature. But we can think on the fly.
Yeah.
No matter how stressful situation is, we can come up with something to do immediately rather than go, well, wait, I need a minute. Give me a second. Let me think this through. What do I got to do? We can make decisions on little information, and more often than not, they turn out to be the right decisions, as opposed to people who've never been in a situation like that. And I'm not knocking people who weren't in the military, so please don't think that's what I'm doing. I am not doing that. I'm just saying there's a specific set of skills most people in the military get, and that's thinking on the fly and dealing with pressure in a different way. Some people fold who haven't been in that type of situation. Some people get scared and panic. Most people in the military that I've met, including Mr. Burnett here, we can take it. We're still going to be scared and frazzled, but we can still come up with a game plan like, hey, we got to do this. Let's do this now and move forward. And I think people need to understand that when you have someone like that in a position of decision making, that's an important skill to have. It shouldn't be overlooked. It shouldn't be like, it's not that. It's very important. Yeah. And I think that's what people need to know about you as well, that you've been in a combat situation, you've led men into combat. Not much out of well, it could be different. Some things out of DC might be just as bad, but you'll be able to handle it in stride, move forward, and come up with a decision quickly rather than take forever. And I think that's important for people to know.
And I appreciate you highlighting that. I mean, you were an E4, and I think you and I both know E4s keep the military running. Those are the guys. That's where the rubber meets the road, and those are the guys that are truly keeping the machine running. So I thank you for your service, and I know just how hard it is to be an E4 because you're accountable to your guys, and you're probably accountable to who knows how many chiefs or senior enlisted, and then you've got officers above that trying to plan for you. So you definitely solved some difficult problems there.
Yeah,
I was going to highlight one other thing about what you said there. Something that I think has been lost in coming right from active duty. I only retired in February of this year, so I only took the uniform off less than 5 months ago. I served for 22 years with a sense of selflessness. And that is everything you do as a leader in the Marine Corps is to set the conditions for other people to succeed. Their success is a reflection of your planning and your effort. We've lost that in politics. Yes. This has become a zero-sum game. And it's almost as if the citizens of these congressional districts and different states are now pawns in a political game. If you're going to DC for any other reason than to serve selflessly, to set the conditions for your residents to have a better opportunity in life, to make their own decisions, to raise their children, to start a business, to be able to have some distance in their bills and how much money they bring home, then you're there for the wrong reason. And that's why I'm running, is that I feel like my family, a family of 6 on a single military income, we've struggled with inflation. We've struggled with the cost of living. We're experiencing a lot of the problems that families are having across CD6. And I'm sure you know this, but Delaney lives in CD8.
Yep.
She lives in a $3 or $4 million mansion. Now, they've had tremendous success in their lives, and that's great, but that's not reflective of the constituents and the residents of CD6. They're not living the experience that the rest of us are living. So I've said we need to get back to those common values that unite all of us, and that is, how do we set the conditions for families and small businesses that are struggling to do better?
I agree completely. I'd even take it one step further. And I wish someone would enact a law or something that says you can only run for a position in the district you live in. You shouldn't be able to live in another district and run for a separate district for any position there. I don't think that's right, and I don't agree with it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just how I feel. Like you said, if I live in District 8 and I run for District 6, I have no connection to my district. There's nothing that I feel connected to. I don't care. I don't live there. What happens. It doesn't affect me. And I think that's a problem.
And, even little things like, and this is going to sound petty, but, for example, when the price of milk changes, that affects my family's budget.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine that affects Delaney on a daily basis. That might be a mild annoyance. It might be something that's interesting, but my wife and I will have to sit down and revisit the budget every time there's a fluctuation in the things that we need for our kids. So these aren't abstract problems for me. These are things that I'm living and experiencing in CD6. Delaney actually lives in Raskin's district. And Raskin is probably a better representative of her interest than she is of the interests of the residents of CD6. So I want to bring my experience, both from the military and as a father and as a family that's struggling now, back to Congress to provide that point of view, and then ultimately to fight for the interests of CD6 first.
Yeah, I No arguments for me there, Marine. I'm right there with you. Let's talk about tax. You've pledged a fight for lower taxes. Can you kind of get into how you would do that and what you would want to do to help working families and small businesses in Maryland, Western Maryland, and then this district? What would you like to do to help them?
Well, first, I would approach everything first from an accountability standpoint. Are we using tax dollars to their optimized levels? And first, we're not. I think we saw that with the recent activity in DC and with the rescission package. We'd have to return as much money that we possibly can. And whether that's revisiting the tax code, whether that's being better stewards of taxpayer dollars, I would start with accountability. And from there, I would entertain any legislation that is going to alleviate the tax burden on middle income families. Right now, they're the driver of the economy, and we're putting them in a terrible position to have to choose between trying to provide for their families and to take the steps that are necessary to ensure that their children have the same opportunities they had. So I would first look at possibly revisiting the tax code. I would look at any legislation that's going to ease the tax burden on middle income families or hardworking families and small businesses. And then the other part is I would look at deregulation that right now is stifling a lot of entrepreneurial interests. It's hurting farmers. And I would want to look at every piece of legislation as how can we set the conditions for these folks to do better, to really kickstart our economy again.
What do you see, since we're in Maryland, how do I word this? I know Moore, our governor, is one of the biggest obstacles to growth in this state. I don't even understand how people can defend what he's doing. With him really destroying the state, how could you in DC help Maryland? I mean, I know it's a weird question, but I would like to know. Fighting Moore is going to be difficult. He's got the backing.
I think there's a couple of ways. That's actually a great question, because what I've also been trying to convince people of is we need to change the narrative, and that is we need to start winning. And then once we win and we have CD6, we can now shift the narrative from expecting to lose or to getting the short end of both county and state level policies. But now we've got somebody fighting for federal dollars and federal opportunity. Because right now, all you have is an automatic no vote from both Raskin and Delaney. There's no one really representing local interests outside of aligning with Democratic national talking points and voting in opposition to everything. So I think you can actually put pressure on Maryland by then fighting for opportunities that the state will then have to reconcile their policies or their preferences around either saying no to a federal opportunity that's otherwise been provided for or earmarked, or then negotiating an opportunity from the federal level to force the state to reconcile its own activities, which is a lot of what I think happened with the big, beautiful bill. You now are going to have a reckoning of wasteful state spending it's going to be brought to the forefront. The big, beautiful bill is more than just the biggest tax cut in history. It's going to force states to revisit parts of their budget that had become somewhat bloated because they were so dependent on wasteful federal dollars. So I feel like there is a way to influence Maryland at the state level by how we approach federal legislation and how we leverage the federal opportunity and federal dollars that we could funnel this way.
I like it. Get one more question in before we cut to a break real quick. Let me find where I put it. Border security. That's the big thing now. People are all border security, and everybody knows where I stand on that. It's legend where I stand. You can't emphasize securing the border. What specific policies or legislation would you like to propose to address border security that would help not just Maryland, but the entire country?
Well, I mean, border security is national security. And I saw this firsthand when I was at U.S. Southern Command. At the time, we knew that there were returning foreign fighters leaving the Levant. In other words, these are ISIS fighters. And that most countries in South America had if it didn't happen here, we don't care about it. So there were returning foreign fighters going into South America, and they were being reintegrated. And then they would be a part of some of these caravans that were moving north. We simply couldn't track them all. So we knew that the border was more than just a concern in terms of how we're managing who's coming in and how they're coming in. It was a valid national security concern. And as these returning foreign fighters that were basically spreading out across U.S. Southern Command's AO, or area of responsibility, we knew that we had a real vulnerability. So I think if you're going to have any type of accountability, you have to start with a secure border. And once you secure the border, and it's clear, we didn't need more laws. We simply needed to enforce the existing laws that we had. What I do like right now is I like the direction we're going. And that is, we are still deporting violent criminals and folks that came here unlawfully. And we're looking at how we can address what was a broken border policy for the last 20 or 30 years, particularly for the last 4.
Right.
But I also like the fact that now that we have a secure border, I think we can have an intelligent discussion about immigration reform, and whether that includes a pathway to citizenship for some folks that have been here and contributing. That's up for discussion. But what's most important is that we have secured the border. We are maintaining accountability. We are going to be a nation of laws, and we're going to uphold the rule of law. And now that we've done that, we can look at comprehensive immigration reform that will not only ensure that no matter what administration's in power, there's going to be requirements to maintain a secure border, and that we take steps to codify what right now is being held together by executive order and policy. We need to turn that into legislation that is going to absolutely secure the border and then provide that immigration reform that we've been kicking the can down the road for years on.
Yeah, it seems to be the issue with DC. They like to kick things further down the road, and when they get there, they kick it further down the road and just don't want to deal with it.
Well, nobody wants to govern. I mean, in order to do something, you take risk. You could be wrong. You would have to go down a path, try to fix something, and if it doesn't get fixed the first time around, you have to be willing to go back and revisit it. There seems to be a desire to just criticize the inability to solve a problem without anybody actually committing to solving it. I don't know any other approach. I mean, your background in the Navy, mine in the Marine Corps, we run towards a fight and we solve problems. And that's what I would want to do here. And that may happen, and you do so at the expense of, your political points. But if you're only in Congress to score political points or to pad your own nest egg, you're there for the wrong reasons. You're not leading, you're not setting the conditions for other people to succeed, and you're no longer looking out for your constituents or national interests.
Yeah, I can't remember how many times I heard in the Navy, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. Yep. And that made perfect sense. It's like, everyone can point out the problem. How are we going to fix it? I already know what the problem is. How do we fix it?
That's right.
We're going to take a quick break, pay some bills here. Then we're going to come back and talk with Chris Burnett more. I got some more questions for him. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And if I can get to him, I will ask him. So we will be right back.
America's Pulse Network. The mainstream media is bought and paid for. The truth is twisted to fit their agenda. But America is waking up because podcasts are the future for trusted media. Welcome to the America's Pulse Network. It is a network built by patriots that upholds the Constitution. The America's Pulse Network stands for God, truth, and the America First movement. There is no corporate propaganda, no government spin, just real news, real talk, and real voices fighting for faith, freedom, and the future of this great nation with common sense. Here are some of America's Pulse Network podcasts. Alexandra Levine Live, hosted by Alexandra Levine. Jersey Shore Podcast, hosted by Damon Galdo. The Conservative Corner, hosted by Seth Eisenberg. APN's The Pulse, hosted by Alexandra, Damon, and Seth. So tune into America's Pulse Network on the following social media platforms: X/Twitter, Rumble, Truth Social, Facebook, and YouTube. Join the revolution. Because the pulse of America beats for God and country. America's Pulse Network is for faith, family, freedom, and truth.
So in case you're just joining us, which is probably the case, it's Sunday, when be with your family, not listening to me run my mouth. We're here with Chris Burnett. He's running for Congress in Maryland, District 6. We've been talking with him, and he's a Marine. I'm in the Navy. So again, I'm keeping the words very small, and I'm talking directly to him because I know if something shiny happens, oh, look, a squirrel. But yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And here's this question kind of leads into what we've been talking about, sort of, kind of bipartisanship. The 6th district is politically complected. It's not just one, like you said. You've got a mixture. How do you work across party lines while still maintaining a conservative stance, but bringing people together? How do you see that working? How are you going to do that?
Well, first, I think you have to have a common sense approach to leading. And what I mean by that is focus on issues that we're all very interested in. fiscal responsibility, lower taxes, less regulation, more opportunity. And then you start looking at things like how we're educating our children, how we're interfering with parental rights. And when you address those issues, I think those cut across party lines. We're not going to delve into what I think are non-issues. You focus on the things that matter, things that are affecting daily lives. And when you do that, I think you can start getting folks that are going to gravitate to those solutions. If you're just going to bark talking points, well, then all you're really talking to is your base, and you're going to struggle. You're not going to make any progress on either side, and you're really just going to be repeating what other people are saying and not leading. I think focusing on those basic values of what affects people every single day, that will unite Garrett to Montgomery County. And you'd pointed out, this has got to be one of the most diverse congressional districts in the country, because you're talking about agricultural and rural setting out in Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington County. Yep. And then when you get into Montgomery County, it's one of the wealthiest, one of the most liberal areas in the country. And you have to figure out how to appeal to a very broad population. And I think it comes down to being accountable and being transparent. If you can do those two things, not everyone has to agree with everything that you do, but if they trust that you're trying to set the conditions for as many people to prosper as possible, I think that resonates across party lines.
Oh, I agree. And I think a lot of people get twisted up with, well, I don't agree with everything he says. You're not going to meet anybody you agree with everything they say. And if you say you agree with everything, one of the two people are lying, because you'll never agree with everybody on everything. And I agree. Sometimes you got to go, hey, look, pick your battles, choose them wisely. You may not agree with it on this, but what he's saying about this makes sense. Which is more important? Is this more important than that? And if it is, stand your ground. But you got to be able to compromise on some things. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought it up. Education and parental right. That's a big topic. That's probably bigger than the border. I mean, everywhere you look, there's school districts saying, no, we're not going to tell you about this. Parents going, well, you have to. You got to tell me about this. And there's a battle. I will always err on the side of caution when it comes to children and side with children. Always. I don't care the issue, but I will always side with children and want to make them safe. I personally think some of the decisions that are coming out of education are not for children, but they're to make adults feel better about themselves. They're trying to look morally superior and putting aside the needs of children. My opinion. And again, like I said earlier, just because I say it doesn't mean he agrees with it. So don't put my words in his mouth. What is your opinion on parental right in schools? Do you think it's going far enough? Should it go farther? And what would you do if you had a magic wand and could change it all at one time?
Well, I'll start with, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I have 4 kids in Montgomery County Public Schools. I've got a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 17-year-old. So I start with, parents are the first and most important source of educating their children. You cannot interfere with, or any way, shape, or form, put a wedge between a child and their parent. So I start there. Then, in terms of how you legislate that, this is where you have to start looking at, okay, if we're going to try to open the aperture for various reasons, the first question I have is, what is the educational value? I can entertain any proposal. Tell me what the educational value is. If you can do that, then we can at least have an intelligent discussion about what you're doing in terms of curriculum and what you're doing in terms of how you're approaching opt-out. But if you're not willing to have that conversation, or you can't articulate the educational value, or you're simply going to unilaterally take away a parent's right to know about the well-being of their child while they're at school, and you have absolutely no say in the curriculum whatsoever, that's a problem. And so I would start with that. Parents first. Parents' opportunity to influence their children's education is absolute. And then look at any other conversation, starting with educational value.
I agree with that. I know some people, and again, you may disagree with me on this. People say, well, the Bible shouldn't be in school. I look at it at a different angle. The Bible is a history book. If for no other reason, teach it as in history. Like there's stuff that's in that book that's proven. It's not just fiction. There's stuff that's actually happened they can prove. So why not teach it as a history book? Why not look at it at that angle? And if you're going to do that, I have no problem with the Quran being taught as a history text, or the Talmud, or any other religious text, as long as it's presented as a history. I have no problem with that. But some people don't even want that. They don't want, if you do that, then you're going to have prayers in school. And then we're going to do. I think people get a little bit of information, and from that they make it into a mountain. It's gone from this to all of a sudden now we're going to be having baptisms, and they're going to do it church services in schools if we do this. And I don't agree that would ever happen. But how do you feel about some people saying prayer in school is good, some are saying prayer is bad? What do you feel about that? Personally, it doesn't have to be your position politically, but personally, what do you feel about that?
Well, first, I feel as though it's critically important that we teach right from wrong.
Yes.
And that you have moral grounding. And if you want to understand the rule of law, you have to understand how we've come to interpret a sense of right and wrong. And we've drawn from religious text and we've applied them in a secular way. So I think they're an invaluable part of this discussion. And I think how people exercise their faith across various backgrounds is a uniquely personal experience.
Yes.
And I think giving folks the opportunity to express themselves is critically important. Now, the school doesn't have to embrace this under a separation of church and state, but I think allowing people the time or the space to exercise their faith so that they can feel at home or at ease with the environment that they're in is a very good thing. And I think when you're teaching right and wrong, and you're teaching values that relate to understanding the rule of law, that understanding hard work and understanding accountability, all of these texts are invaluable. So I think there's an educational value in what you described. And it gets back to, I would want to first start with parents' choice. If this is a issue that goes beyond or something that we can't simply align to a single set of parents, which of course we can't, then I would want to look at what is the educational value. And what you articulated, there's an educational value. So I would be very amenable to having that discussion about, let's see how we're using these texts to teach a sense of right and wrong, the rule of law, basic accountability and personal responsibility, and then expose people to maybe other faiths so that they have an understanding in that inclusivity sense of, okay, there are different perspectives, but we all agree that certain things are universal. Yeah. How we approach the rule of law, how we approach interacting with one another, how we behave towards one another. These are invaluable lessons.
Yeah, my son recently, well, not by recently, I mean, it's the last like 7 or 8 months, we were in a bookstore and he picked up the Quran. He goes, "Is it okay if I read this?" I said, "Of course. I have no problem with it. Read it. You may get a different perspective on things. I have no problem with teaching like anything in school. Any knowledge is good. Yeah. I have heard of bad knowledge. There's always something you can take from it that will help you. And I'm all for that, especially with kids. I mean,
yeah,
it's what they're learning in some schools nowadays. It hurts my heart that some kids have to go through that. I don't understand it. I never will. And we can talk about that another time. We can make a whole show, a whole hour and a half about that. You touched on it earlier, veterans, which I'm sure is a cause near and dear to your heart like mine. And because my daughter is in the military, my son wants to go in the military. My personal belief is I think this country, for the most part, has kind of turned their back on veterans. It's kind of swinging a little bit now with Trump in office, trying to correct that. But I don't think it's happening fast enough. I think I read somewhere 45 to 52% of all homeless people in this country are veterans, and most of them are suffering from mental disorder. And then we have people that want to, again, my opinion, and I'm not saying this is your opinion, my opinion, we want to open the border and give illegal aliens tax money, medical care, housing. I firmly believe we should take care of those that took care of us first and then let it funnel down from there. How would you help veterans once you get in office? What would you do?
Well, first, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the problem that we have with so many veterans is they've lost a sense of purpose and they've lost their identity. And in large part, it's because they were returned to a society that didn't understand their experience and didn't quite know how to interact with them. I think we're getting better. Yes. I think in general, people have a greater sense of what these folks need. Some of these individuals have served in extraordinary circumstances, have made incredibly difficult decisions, and have seen things that are hard to describe to somebody who hasn't been there. And then they come back and they can't get an entry-level position because they don't have the right credentials or they don't have the right training. That's demoralizing. And so when you go from a place where you were leading and making decisions in these difficult settings to now you can't even get an entry-level position, or you're not trusted in a supervisory role because you don't have 2 years of experience in this particular role, that's difficult. So I think we have to do a better job with job training. I think we have to do a better job of providing them with the assistance that they need, either through the VA or just community level organizations, providing outreach and providing a means of support. I'm a member of the VFW and the American Legion. I think these are underutilized resources. I think those organizations did tremendous things for our World War II, Korean, and Vietnam War veterans. And I think that for some reason, the Global War on Terrorism generation hasn't tapped into those clubs or those organizations just yet. So I would start with what you just described. If we're not taking care of our veterans, we have to really rethink our priorities. Mm-hmm. If we're not looking at their needs first, then what are we doing? These are people that took a break from their lives, answered the call to service, served in combat, deployed to war, and are now struggling. If we're not putting them into some type of housing, if we're not providing them with some type of long-term assistance to help them with their mental health issues or some of their physical ailments, then we're failing. So I would make any opportunity to support our veterans a priority. I can't emphasize that enough. Where I would begin is, of course, to optimize the services that are in place. I feel like right now there's some inefficiencies that we could address. Once you address those inefficiencies, I wouldn't want to just simply throw more money at it.
Right,
I want to optimize what we're doing, look at how we're using this web of services, and then find out how we can enhance that with either additional funding, additional resources, additional connections amongst all these organizations that are helping veterans, and then take whatever steps are needed to codify that so that it's not something that would change with each administration. It's something that now it's baked into our DNA. It's part of our legal framework, and it is an absolute guarantee for veterans that they will get the assistance they need, regardless of what stage they are in life. And in some cases, I would look very closely at how folks were discharged. I know there's some folks based on an administrative discharge, and they're shut out from some of the resources they need. I'm not talking about court-martial convictions. Right. I'm talking about the administrative discharges. I feel like some of those folks have fallen through the cracks, and those are probably some of those same folks that left the service in a less than ideal way, and then they continue to spin to now they're suffering from mental health issues and find themselves homeless with no remedies whatsoever. So I would look at all the different ways that we can optimize what's in place, enhance what's available, and then look for those segments that might otherwise have been overlooked.
And I will say this, I had a very serious health issue. I was out of work for 3.5 months, and I went to the VA in Martinsburg, the hospital there. I was there for a long time. I had a really gruesome surgery. And I will say that's probably the best care I've gotten. In general, between that, the VA and civilian hospitals, I felt more confident. I felt more involved in my health care. The doctors and nurses and the staff were much more open and discussful. And I never felt like I was bothering them by asking, well, what about this? What about this? As compared to civilian hospitals where the doctor rushes in, reads off some numbers or says, blah, 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 your test results will be back tomorrow, and they leave. And you don't really get a chance to talk to them. So I can say, like I said, it is turning. There is a noticeable upward swing with the VA right now, and I can attest to it, and I'm more than grateful for the care I received in Martinsburg. I can't sing their praises enough. If everybody could go there, I would tell them to go there. The doctors were incredible. But yeah, I agree there needs to be more done. I was in there with a gentleman, and I don't want to give his name or his branch, but was in an explosion and lost both his legs and was just, still gung ho. Just, hey, this is great. I'm alive. I got hands. I don't need both my legs. And it was good to see a brother, a fellow service member, still there, still in the fight. And then you walk out and people are complaining that we're not giving enough money to illegal immigrants. They're not getting enough tax help. They're not getting enough health care benefits. In my opinion, that's got to stop. I mean, this guy's there with no legs. Didn't ask for that to happen. He volunteered. He stepped into the breach, and that's what happened to him. And there are more people fighting for people who shouldn't be here than there were fighting for him. And that really upset me. So I'm with you on that. Whatever you do, I would back 100% and twice on Sundays.
In some ways, I think we've become somewhat consumed by our own pettiness. Whenever you serve overseas, or in your case, when you serve underway, you deal with some pretty miserable circumstances. So you learn to appreciate the little things in life, and you find yourself not getting caught up in the pettiness. And I feel like at times our politics have been reduced to the pettiest of differences for the sake of outrage. That doesn't solve anybody's problem. That doesn't help that veteran who lost his legs and has a great attitude. You need to meet that individual where he's at and ensure that he has the assistance and services that he's earned. And then by taking care of him and taking care of his families, we're meeting that obligation that we made to him when he put his hand up and swore allegiance to fight and defend the Constitution. In this case, made a pretty significant sacrifice, and we owe that to those individuals. And we're just not doing enough yet.
No, and I don't think people understand when we took that oath, me, you, and everybody else, it doesn't say until January 2030. It's open-ended. That oath is forever. And I don't think people understand that I would go back in a second if something happened and they called me, hey, look, we need you back. You need to come report to Norfolk. I would be there in an hour. I would get there as soon as I could and stand watch. I would do what I have to do. And I haven't met anybody who's a veteran that does not feel the same way, that if something happened and they were called back immediately without question, they would report to where they had to report to and be ready to do what they had to do. And that's a good thing. I mean, we're a country that service is voluntary. You're not conscripted. You don't have to serve. And we have the finest military in the world because of that. People choose to be in that position. They choose to step up, and it shows. It's awesome.
That brings a great point. I've been asked recently about Secretary of Defense Hegseth and the impact he's had. And I said, first and foremost, I have a tremendous amount of respect for anybody that goes through that gauntlet that he went through and comes out the other side still leading. Yep. So first, a tremendous amount of respect for what he went through, but more importantly, what he's done in an extremely short period of time. He's changed the mindset. We had become an organization, and I mean all of the branches, that were caught up in this DEI nonsense. We were no longer focused on warfighting. We were no longer focused on readiness. We were no longer focused on replacing equipment that was either worn out or needed to be replaced. We were more caught up in our differences and who has been a victim and who's been put into a position where they were uncomfortable and I feel like in the last 6 months, he's reset an expectation of you join the military to be challenged. Yeah. You join the military because it's the greatest organization in the world. It's going to challenge you to do things you never thought you were capable of doing. And you're going to be doing them for the best of possible reasons. And that is to defend the people to your right and to your left. And most importantly, to ensure that everybody that you've left behind, that they're safe, that they're protected, and that they have the ability to go about their lives and not even have to think about some of the things that you're confronted with on a daily basis while you're deployed, either in a security posture or deployed to a combat zone. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for what he's done. I can't believe just how quickly that culture has shifted. And most importantly, our recruiting numbers, our retention numbers are through the roof. And it was just as simple as resetting priorities and then focusing on what matters. And that is warfighting and taking care of the people that are going to go and do the warfighting if and when they're asked.
True. And I can't remember where I read it, but it stuck with me. I don't fight because I hate what's in front of me. I fight because I care about what's next to me and I love what's behind me. Exactly. That really just stuck with me. And it makes sense. I've never met anybody, even Marines, join the military because they want to fight. They don't want to go kill people. They want to defend what they have, what they're standing in front of. What's behind them is what they're concerned about. What's in front of them is just a mission. I have to do it. Don't hate it. Don't like it. It just is. But I love what's behind me and I care about what's next to me. And it stuck with me. Kind of in that vein, law enforcement. It's been getting beat up for the last 4 years. It's been taking a beating. Politicians have been picking on it. Let's defund the police. You've got riots springing up everywhere. LA is still going on with the anti-ICE riots. They had a big thing in Kentucky this weekend on the bridge. I don't know if you saw the video of that. It's out of hand. How would you try to rein in that anti-police rhetoric and publicly, how would you support law enforcement from county to state to federal?
Well, I know where you're going with this. First of all, the anti-police rhetoric, I respect their freedom of speech, if you want to call it that. But any actions taken against any law enforcement cannot be tolerated. We have to make sure that our police can go out, do their mission, and go home to their loved ones. If people want to complain about it and they want to whine and they want to organize a protest, by all means. We live in a free country. I fought for people that wanted to do things that I find personally despicable. So if they want to say that stuff, they want to go ahead, but do not interfere with their mission. Do not condemn them to a life of being marginalized or being treated like they're doing something wrong. They're doing a job that we take for granted every single day. The fact that we have peace, stability, and prosperity is a reflection of their hard work. None of this happens without dedicated police. So first, I would start with making sure they have the tools and resources that are needed. And then I would look at anything else that would possibly help them with their mission. I know that there has been a question about immunity, whether police officers should be insulated from consequence. I would support that in the limited sense that it was meant to be available. And that is, if they're doing something in their official capacity, yes, they should be protected, because people make mistakes, things happen. And I don't want a police officer to not respond out of the possibility of personal liability. Now, I know that's going to get spun and I'll have to answer to this later, but I thought that we went down a dangerous path by saying that we're going to hold individual police officers personally liable for things they're doing in their official capacity. And all that did was undermine their ability to do what needed to be done. Yep. And I felt like we reached a point that we were more concerned about the victim of an arrest than what the person did to be arrested. Now, I know that you have to have accountability, and any organization is going to have good, bad, and everything in between. Right. You have to have a means of holding themselves accountable personally and professionally, but we also have to give them the ability to execute their mission to ensure that we can go about our lives and not even have to think about many of the things that would otherwise change our behavior. We don't even think about whether our car is going to get stolen. We don't think about our house being broken into. We don't think about, going for a jog that we're going to get mugged or assaulted. That's in large part because of the great work that they do every single day. So I would support them unequivocally to then ensure they had the tools that they needed, to make sure they had the protections that were needed to they could do their job, and then also have the ability to provide some level of accountability, to have it, their actions reviewed. I think body cameras are a great idea. I think it has exposed some bad apples, but more importantly, it has protected police officers. So I think those types of solutions, whether it's through federal funding or state funding, it's a step in the right direction because it's accountability. The camera doesn't lie. So you give them the protections that they need when they're acting in their official capacity, and then ensure that the evidence that is needed to either protect them or protect somebody that's been mistreated by the police, that we have those things in place.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that some of these situations police officers find themselves in, they have 2 seconds to make a decision. They don't have the ability to go timeout. Let me take a step back and kind of look at everything and look at all the facts. They have 2 seconds. Either they're going to go home or they're not going to go home. And that's a tremendous amount of pressure. That is stress beyond measure. And like you said, there's sometimes mistakes get made. Thank God in this country, that's not very often.
Yeah.
And when it does happen, it's usually corrected almost immediately. But it's unfair for some people to think, well, police officers are police officers, so they're supermen. They should be able to think faster and act faster and do things quicker than us because they should be trained that way. You can't train that into somebody. You have 2 seconds, make a decision. It's live or die. And I agree with body cams. I think they work both ways. Protect the police officer, or in some cases protect the citizen because, hey, he did this and it's on the camera. I'm not lying to you. But yeah, I agree. And not only because I was the son of a police officer, but anybody can turn on the news and see they're getting beat up. They're taking a lot of crap for stuff that they have no control over, and it's not fair. Even now, people are getting on. What was it in Texas last week? The guy was killing firefighters. It's getting to the point where it's almost like we're in a war zone. No matter where you are, somebody's going to do something because their feelings are hurt or they don't like something that an officer said or what the government's doing. And it's crazy. That's why I don't understand. You're a very intelligent person. Why do you want to get into politics? Why?
You're not the first person that's asked me that. So as I mentioned earlier, I recently retired. I spent 22 years on active duty, and even that was not a plan. So I decided to go to law school. Sort of a funny story. I was living in Hilton Head, South Carolina, of all places, working as a carpenter. And I had spent most of my young adult life, working as a carpenter and really enjoying that. And I was playing rugby, and the opposing winger happened to be a lawyer that was stationed at Paris Island. And so if you know anything about rugby, if you're on the wing, you don't get the ball that often, but the few times you get it, you're expected to score. So we would talk on the side of the field, and he would like, Chris, you seem like, you're swinging a hammer, why don't you think about doing something else? And I was, I love what I'm doing right now. I'm swinging a hammer all day long. I get to play rugby. This is great. He's like, you know what, Chris, the hardest thing you can do is become a Marine Corps officer. And if you really, really want to do something hard, you should go to law school. And I remember thinking like, okay, this is the hardest thing I can do. I'll do that. So apparently I was very impressionable. So from that conversation, I called a recruiter. They said, hey, you got to do X, Y, and Z and go to law school. So I started going down that path. I managed to get myself into law school and got myself, stopped swinging a hammer, stopped playing rugby, and went to law school. And then I found myself at OCS in 2001. And this is the summer of 2001. I was commissioned in July, and I'm going back into my second year of law school now at the University of Pittsburgh. And then that was September 11th. That changed the entire trajectory of my adult life. Like I said, I was content swinging a hammer and playing rugby. I was now thinking that I would, go into and probably do construction law as a lawyer, more than likely in Pittsburgh after I did a couple of years in the Marine Corps. And when that happened, that changed the entire trajectory of my life. My focus went entirely from, how can I have a comfortable life in Pittsburgh to how can I get myself onto active duty sooner? How can I contribute to making this right? So as I came on active duty as a lawyer, all I wanted to do was support what we were doing downrange. And that resulted in 5 different deployments, 4 on the ground in Iraq and 1 on a Marine Expeditionary Unit. I had a chance to serve as a company commander in Taqadum, which is in Al Anbar province. I was the acting executive officer of the 13th MU. I was the commander of troops on the LHD, or the small aircraft carrier that is an amphib. And then I also had teams of XOTs, or executive on the other ships. They were also answering, which was a phenomenal experience to try to organize that level of logistics. And throughout that time, I found myself drawn to the fight. I found myself wanting to be at the point of the problem. If I could be at that point of friction and I could provide some clarity, I could provide some assistance, I could be in the fight, figuratively or literally, that's where I wanted to be. So I mention all of that because as I approached my retirement, my wife and I sat down and she had said, all right, no more deployments, no more time away. Because I forgot to mention, across those 22 years, I spent nearly 7 years away. And so that was a countless number of birthdays, first steps, holidays, you name it. So my wife was eager for me to not do that again. So when the time came, she had said, okay, no more moves, no more deployments. What are you going to do next? And I think the first thought was I would go and try to capitalize on all of that experience. The Marine Corps was gracious enough to send me away for 3 advanced degrees. I got a master's degree in international affairs from Norwich, LLM, or like a master's degree in the law, for international operational law, and then a last master's degree, 3 more master's degrees than I ever thought I needed in national security and foreign policy. So my wife's expectation is that we would take all that experience and finally have some stability and sort of, I hate to say it, kind of cash in. And then I realized I couldn't live with myself if I went from serving selflessly for 22 years, only wanting to set the conditions for others to succeed, to now selfishly taking advantage of a system that no longer takes into account the struggles of hardworking families, small businesses, farmers, and families just like mine. And that was when it became clear that while I'm transitioning out of the military, while I'm going through this life-changing experience, this is the right time to continue to serve. This is the right time to take that mindset that I embraced as a Marine and tried to live up to every single day, and now take that to Washington. And call me naive, but I think this is what's needed. I think this approach of selfless service, how do we set the conditions for the residents of CD6 to thrive, is the right way to do this. So to answer your question, this was not part of a plan. This was not a 5-year or 10-year plan that I'd ever thought of. It was almost as random as talking to the opposing winger in Hilton Head, South Carolina, This just happened to be talking to my wife. And when we looked around and said, now is the time to continue fighting, but just in a different way, but the same mindset, same approach.
Well, I appreciate it. And I agree with what we talked about earlier before we got on here. More people in the military need to step up and take on this position, this fight, and see, because I'm sure we could make some good changes. There's some great leaders out there that just need to take that step like you did.
And if you don't mind, I wanted to highlight what we talked about earlier. I think more veterans would run, but the cost of entry is so high. Coming off active duty, a family of 6 on a single military income, I don't have a trust fund. I don't have multiple properties. I don't have a savings account that I can tap into to self-fund a campaign. I have to run a grassroots campaign. I can only spend what I raise.
Right.
I'm lucky that right now my family can tighten up their budget and I can run for office. I know there are countless other veterans that are extraordinarily qualified to lead and actually solve problems that simply cannot take that step because they don't either have the current situation that will allow them to take a year to a year and a half to put their life on hold to run for office.
True.
And then what we're left with is it becomes this, whoever has enough money that can buy the name recognition that is needed, they're the folks that get elected. And then we wonder why we're not sending leaders. We're not sending problem solvers to DC. And a lot of it has to do with those people that lead at the community level, in the military, or in other places where their character is at a premium. They're not in a position to run for Congress, to run for Senate, or to run for these positions. So I would hope that as we move forward, that we can create pathways for veterans to really be successful as politicians, because these are some of the folks that are going to solve problems, not run away from them.
I agree. 100%. I agree. Well, I think I've kept you long enough. We went over the 45 minutes, which is fine. I've enjoyed talking to you. I appreciate your time. Is there anywhere you're going to be? People can come see you, or any fundraising events, any public speaking events coming up?
We don't have any events scheduled yet, but we're going to start pushing them out on the website, and it's been running across the bottom of the screen. But burnettforcongress.com is where folks can go to sign up for our newsletter, sign up to volunteer, and then most importantly, they can sign up or have access to donate. We're going to make a big push to try to at least keep pace with Delaney, so that if and when the time comes, we're never going to be able to go dollar for dollar. But if we can spend our money wisely, if we can be good stewards of those supporters, I know we can put together a winning campaign. So I appreciate you having me on tonight. This has been a great conversation. I hope I get to come back.
Whenever you want to. And when you get elected, I hope you can carve out some time once in a while to come back and let us know what's going on in DC and how we can help. I would be appreciative.
And I expected more Marine jokes.
I was going to ask you one more thing before I let you go. I'm curious, what is your favorite flavor crayon?
It's going to have to be green.
Green. That's a bit. Green and orange are the ones I get a lot. Green and orange. Yeah. Well, I thank you for your time, Chris. It's been awesome. And like I said, you are welcome back anytime you want to. I know you've talked to Fred, the president of the Frederick County Conservative Club. I'm the vice president. Whenever you want to come speak there, just show up. We'll give you time to talk. You were more than welcome there. And everybody, again, it's burnettforcongress.com. You go there, find out where he's going to be, how you can help. Running a campaign is not cheap. Even if you have your own money, it is not cheap. $5, $10, $15, $20 may not seem like much to you, but it can be used and is extremely helpful. And if you can't give that, give your time. Door knocking, handing out literature, anything will help a candidate that you support. And if you like Chris, get on his website, figure out how you can help, and do it. And I'm sure he'll appreciate anything you can do for him.
I can't thank anyone enough that takes the time to support a campaign, because it's a lot of work. And I know folks have a life outside of politics. So anything is incredibly appreciated. So thanks again for the announcement, and thanks for having me tonight.
Hey, not a problem. Like I said, whenever you want to come back, you let me know, and I'll be more than glad to have you back on. Again, this is Chris Burnett, running for Congress in Maryland, District 6. His website's running across the bottom, burnettforcongress.com. Check it out. Help him out any way you can. We're going to step away, take a break. When I come back, I'll be finishing up the show. Thanks again for coming. I appreciate it. You're more than welcome anytime you want to come back, Marine.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.
Welcome to America's Pulse Network. This is APN's very own White House correspondent, Alexandra Levine.
This is so amazing and miraculous. We've never had a president in the history of our nation doing this. And we hope to God that he continues doing this forever and ever. Thank you. God bless you, everybody. And God bless President Trump.
And God bless you.
Hello, everyone. This is Alexandra Levine with the America's Pulse Network. I am the White House correspondent right here in the heart of D.C. as President Trump is celebrating 250 years of America and the military.
Subscribe and follow America's Pulse Network on the above social medias.
So everybody, that was Chris Burnett. Again, he's running for Maryland Congress, excuse me, in District 6. He's a Marine, so me and him have a connection. I was in the Navy. We're the men's department. They're the boys' department. So we have that going for each other. He's a great guy. He's a Marine. So you know right off the bat, he's got integrity because Marines don't put out people that don't have integrity or honor. So again, check out his website. Donate what you can. Donate some time. Tell your friends about him. Like I said, he's very straightforward. Nothing that I asked him that he answered left me going, well, what did he mean? I don't understand what he's trying to get at. I don't know what the point was. Very direct, like most Marines are, and that's why I like him. You know where you stand. You never have to question where you are with Marine. He will tell you where you are at all times. If any comments or questions you'd like to post them up, again, we have the chat. Put them up there. I can kind of do two things at once. Maybe not equally as good, but I can. So we got a little bit of the time left, so I'm going to go through some things, and then we're going to wrap up the show. I don't know if you heard over this past weekend, Russia attacked the Ukraine again at night. I think it was like 300 drones and some missiles. That's one of the pictures from the attack, and I think it was Kiev, I believe it was, if I'm remembering correctly. Big attack, and of course, I think recently Ukraine's responded, and now they want to go back to the peace table and talk about things. My opinion on that is well known. I don't think we should be there. We should be funding Ukraine to fight Russia, and vice versa. It needs to end immediately. And for people who are saying, "Hey, well, Russia's going to take Ukraine and then move on to Europe," Russia is so financially depleted, and the supplies are so depleted after this. We don't have to worry about them moving on from Ukraine for quite some time. They can't even take all of Ukraine. They've got a sliver. So I'm not worried about Russia at all. But that war needs to end. It's needless. It's pointless. Nobody's winning. It needs to end. We need to stop supplying him and force him to get back to the tables. Here we go. Israel is kind of giving the business to a Saudi. There's a group of Muslims called the Druze. And it's not so much Islam they follow. They believe Jesus was a prophet. Look into it and you'll see what I mean. But the Israelis are defending them because apparently that government is attacking them. So Israel's trying to step it in on their behalf because they're a very small minority, not a very big group of people. So Israel's stepping in. You know, Israel, the Nazis, the ones committing genocide and killing people, are trying to help somebody else, which is weird because, you know, I thought if they were committing genocide, they wouldn't want to help anybody. They'd let everybody die or they'd help kill them. So maybe it's a lie. Maybe Israel's not really helping anybody. But that's going on in Saudi. And again, I'll defend Israel's right to defend itself, regardless of how they choose to do it. I don't believe there's something is going overboard when you're defending yourself. If you attack someone, you're going to get the full force of what they can do, and you just need to deal with it, or just don't attack them. Again, maybe I'm just old-fashioned. And then this happened in L.A. over the weekend. Hold on, I got some notes on this one. Let me find my notes. Here we go. I swear I've got notes. Here we go. So in Los Angeles, 30 people, or a car plowed into a group of 30 people outside a music venue in Los Angeles. I believe 7 were critically wounded and like 27 or more, or 23 or more were injured. It had apparently the gentleman driving the car was removed from a business, got in his car, then drove through the crowd. So I'm assuming he was drunk or being disruptive, and they threw him out, and he decided, hey, like most ignorant sons of bitches, I'm going to attack people. It had nothing to do with what was going on, and he ran into this crowd of people. His car obviously was destroyed and he couldn't drive. They apparently drug him out of the car of the crowd and somebody shot him. And he managed to run away and they found him. I don't know if he died or not, but now they're looking for the man that shot him. I don't know why. He should be given a medal. There's no excuse for running your car into 30 people just because you're upset that you got removed from a business. I don't agree with vigilante justice, but I can understand exactly why the guy did this. Maybe one of his loved ones was hit by the car. Who knows? But if you drive your car into a crowd of people and your car breaks down, you should fully expect at least, the very least, you should expect an ass kicking coming your way of biblical proportions. I mean, there's no excuse for that. And people say, well, maybe it's a medical emergency. Well, then he would have stopped. He wouldn't have kept going and tried to get away. He would have stopped. So don't make excuses for bad behavior. And if that's the case, it'll come out in the investigation. But I'm willing to bet he was pissed off because he got kicked out of the bar apparently and just decided he was going to take it out on people that had nothing to do with it, and he hurt 30 people. So he got what he deserved as far as I'm concerned. If that's the entirety of the case, him getting thrown out, getting angry, and running over innocent people, he got what he deserved. And I don't need to go any further than that because pretty much everybody knows how I feel about that. I don't need to explain it any further. The next thing I'm going to show you, I kind of touched on it with Chris in Kentucky over the weekend. Anti-ICE protesters took a bridge and they were blocking traffic. And apparently in Kentucky, they didn't get the memo that you're supposed to let these people do what they want to do, when they want to do it, for as long as they want to do it. And you need to sit back and defend them. Yeah. So I'll let the video play. And yeah. You can see the officer with a shotgun. Pump is red. It's probably a beanbag shotgun. This gentleman decided to fight. Please, thank you for fighting me.
Record!
I have no problem.
Record!
I really don't. What you're seeing here is not an overreaction. What you're seeing now is a reaction. People are tired of this. We have the young lady here who decides that she's above the law and will not adhere to the officer's probably lawful orders. I'm not going anywhere. I can imagine what she's saying. I'm hungry. I'm waiting for somebody to deliver my subs. And he's like, no, you need to get off the bridge. You're protesting. She's like, no, I'm really hungry. Female officer steps in and she decides to practice her karate and tries to kick the officer. And the officer's like, you got a taser out, it looks like. And the male officer comes up and goes, yeah, no, we're not playing that game. Tell me how the concrete tastes. It's probably not as good as your Subway. And they handcuff her. Again, this is not brutality. This is people tired of it. We're tired of this. We're tired of people fighting law enforcement for enforcing laws. This was an anti-ICE protest. We're tired of this. You break the law, you're going to be held accountable. End of discussion. This is the result of people being fed up. We're tired of being told enforcing laws is wrong. We're tired of being told if you want to enforce the law, you're a bigot. We're tired of it. It's come to a head now. What's the next thing? If you arrest somebody for speeding, you're racist. People should be allowed to speed. People should be allowed to shoplift. They should be able to assault people, drink and drive because it's not right. It hurts people's feelings, and families are torn apart because of this. Is that what we should start doing? Enforcing laws based on feeling? If it feels good, enforce it. If it's mean and hurts somebody, don't enforcement. What happened in Kentucky is, I want to say, the cure for the disease that this country is facing. Chris Burnett said it earlier. If you want to protest, that's fine. Protest does not include assault, destruction of private property, murder, burning buildings, burning cars. It doesn't involve that. You don't get to assault police officers because you feel strongly about something. And if you do, this is what's going to happen to you. This is what should happen to you. If you swing at an officer, if you kick at an officer, if you resist arrest while you're in the wrong, you deserve an ass whooping. And we saw it. That's what needs to start happening in LA and all these other places, New York, where people think they're above the law because their feelings to them are more important than the law of the land. How they feel about something dictates how they should react. If they don't like it, they should be able to be violent. Because I don't like it, I should be able to be violent towards the people that want to enforce it. In reality, that's not how stuff works. In reality, you can protest. You can address your grievances with people in political office. You can Go to them, email them, call them. You can march down the middle of the street. You can hold signs and have rallies. What you can't do is what you saw. You can't assault police officers. You can't block traffic because, number one, how do you're not blocking someone from getting to the hospital because their loved one's having a stroke or heart attack next to them, and time is of the essence. And now they can't get to the hospital because your dumbass is in the middle of the street holding up a sign saying deportation is evil. You can't do things like this. It's not right. It's not fair to people who are just trying to live their lives that these jobless basement dwelling troglodytes get a wild hair across their ass and want to fight the world because they don't like a law that's being a law. This is a law. By definition, a law is legal until it's challenged in a court and struck down. The law is legal. So the police, ICE, federal law enforcement are enforcing legal laws. And if you don't like it, go to your representative. Tell them you don't like it. Get a lawyer, file a lawsuit. You don't have a right to assault people. You don't have a right to disrupt people's lives. It may cause someone to be injured. You have no right to do that. That's wrong. And to have to tell an adult that you can't do that is crazy. I shouldn't have to tell adults, no, you can't swing at police officers. That's not right. No, you can't kick a cop. That's not right. If I have to tell you that, somewhere along the line, someone has failed you and someone has not taught you just right and wrong. If I have to tell you now at your age, don't swing at police. More importantly, if I have to tell you, hey, if you swing at the cops, they're going to open up your face like a cheaply wrapped sandwich. If I have to tell you that, again, someone has failed you. You've missed something along the way. Your connect is not connecting because everything that happened there is what should happen to anybody that assaults police officers. That should happen to anybody that puts other people in danger. That's exactly what happened. I hope Kentucky, I hope that spreads. I hope they go to LA and they get tired of people burning cars and throwing rocks at cops and bricks and whatever else they're doing, throwing fireworks at them. And the police fight back. And not only the police, but the citizens of that city or that county or wherever that are law-abiding citizens help the police fight back. It's not just on them. It's on us as a society to maintain law and order. They're the enforcement arm, but it's on us to make sure people understand. Raise your kids to understand laws are laws. They're not there to hurt you. They're not there to help you. They are just there. They are there to protect the country, to hold society together. Name me a country or civilization that had no laws and that had no enforcement of laws that's still around today. You can't because it won't last. Anarchy does not last. Anarchy kills itself. It eats itself. Police have a job. We talked about that earlier. A tough job. They do what they got to do just to get home. And I agree with everything I saw on that bridge and that video. I agree with it all. Everything that happened there, I agree with. You don't like a law, there's ways to deal with it. The way they dealt with it there is not the way to do it. And hats off to those officers. What you didn't see, the video cut off, there was a lady to the right that was swinging her sign and stick at a police dog. And you might be able to hear it barking. And I guess she hit it and another officer tackled her and was handcuffing her. And people are yelling brutality. No, what would have been brutal if that canine officer said, you know what? Why don't you play with Fido for a second and let him off the chain and let the dog take care of it? But they didn't. He restrained himself and they took her down and handcuffed her. People don't understand. If you assault a police officer, pretty much their escalation of force does not meet force with force, that they can use whatever force is necessary to overcome the force they're facing. He could have released that dog and been well within his rights. They chose not to. They chose restraint. Take that for what you will. We're getting to that magic hour. And what I like to do, as everybody knows, before I end the show, I have an opinion on something. Sometimes it has something to do with the podcast we just did. Sometimes it's just something out of left field that's been bugging me all week and I got to get it off my chest. This opinion has something to do with what we just watched and the country in general. The relentless disruptions caused by anti-ICE and Antifa protesters, blockades, shutting down critical infrastructure, vandalism, defacing public property and private property, and violent confrontations with law enforcement, as we've just seen, have pushed the boundaries of public tolerance and demanded decisive response. It's time to take the gloves off and deal harshly with these groups to restore order, protect national security, and reassert the rule of law. Their actions, from obstructing ICE facilities and border operations to Antifa street brawls and destruction in urban centers, represent a direct challenge to government authority and public safety. A firm, unapologetic crackdown is not only justified, but necessary to curb the escalating chaos and deter future lawlessness. Anti-ICE protesters have repeatedly targeted immigration enforcement operations, blocking access to detention centers, disrupting border checks, and staging sit-ins that paralyze local communities. These acts, often cloaked in moral rhetoric about immigration policy, create tangible harm, delaying critical law enforcement operations, endangering public safety, and straining municipal resources. Similarly, Antifa's tactics, including smashing windows, setting fires, and engaging in physical altercations with police or counter-protesters, have turned streets into battlegrounds. Incidents like the 2017 Berkeley protests, where Antifa clashed violently with opposing groups, or the 2019 Portland demonstrations, where ICE facilities were besieged, underscore the growing audacity of these movements. Such behavior cannot be dismissed as mere dissonant. It is a calculated assault on the mechanisms that maintain social stability. A hardline approach is the only effective response. Mass arrests, the use of tear gas, and rapid physical disperse of protests are proven tools for shutting down unlawful unrest. The 1999 WTO protests in Seattle provide a clear precedent. When authorities deployed overwhelming force, including riot police and chemical agents, tear gas, they successfully quelled a chaotic situation that threatened to spiral out of control. Similarly, federal interventions during periods of heightened unrest have demonstrated that a strong show of force can restore calm and discourage further disruptions. Hesitation or leniency sends the opposite message, emboldening protesters to escalate their tactics, as seen in repeated blockades of ICE facilities or Antifa's coordinated attacks on police officers and their precincts. A robust crackdown backed by riot gear, tactical units, and federal agents signals that the government will not cede control to unlawful mobs. The argument that protests deserve protection under free speech must be weighed against the imperative of public safety. While the First Amendment does guarantee the right to assemble, it does not grant a blank check for vandalism, violence, or interference with lawful government operations. Anti-ICE and Antifa protesters often cross that line, exploiting legal protections to sow disorder. Courts have historically upheld the government's right to impose limits on protests that endanger public welfare, as seen in rulings affirming curfews or dispersal orders during riots. When protesters block highways, deface federal buildings, or assault federal and local officers, they forfeit the presumption of peaceful intent. Authorities must prioritize the safety of other citizens and the integrity of institutions over the demands of groups who weaponize their rights to disrupt. Critics warn of backlash, but the risk of inaction is far greater. Allowing anti-ICE and Antifa protests to continue unchecked fuels a cycle of escalation, where each unpunished act inspires bolder, more destructive behavior. The ripple effects are profound. Businesses suffer loss from vandalism, communities lose access to essential services during blockades, and law enforcement officers face heightened risks. A firm response, swift, visible, uncompromising, and legal, deters future chaos. Deploying federal agents is seen in response to urban unrest in recent years, and as recently as in LA, or using advanced crowd control measures like water cannons or rubber bullets, ensures that protests do not spiral into broader anarchy. These tactics, while yes, controversial, have a track record of successfully reestablishing order, as evident by the rapid containment of violent demonstrations in cities like LA, Baltimore, and DC during periods of civil unrest. Taking off the gloves means prioritizing action over appeasement. It means equipping law enforcement with the tools and authority to disperse crowds, detain agitators, and protect public infrastructure. It means rejecting the notion that dialogue or concessions can placate groups committed to disruption, violence, and vandalism. The longer authorities hesitate, the more emboldened these protesters become, and the greater the cost to society. A hardline stance, backed by arrests and prosecutions, and if necessary, overwhelming force, is the only path to restoring stability and ensuring that the rule of law prevails over the chaos in the streets. I am all for legal protest. I am all for people letting know that they're upset about something, but you are not allowed to hurt, people. You're not allowed to assault police officers. You're not allowed to burn cars or vandalize off buildings or businesses. The minute you do, you are no longer a legal protest. You're now a riot, and you should be handled as such. Again, that's my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. You can tell me to pound rocks. Completely up to you. Well, I want to thank Chris Burnett for coming here. Again, he's running for Congress in Maryland District 6. You can go to his website, burnettforcongress.com, find out more about him, get in contact with him yourself. I'm sure he'll be more than glad to respond to emails. Make sure you donate some money to him or donate your time or just ask how you can help. Remember, we have Damon, the Hammer Galdo. He has a podcast and a radio show on this network. Alexander Levine has her podcast. We all do Wednesday nights on the Pulse at 8. I'm here every Sunday at 7 till 8:30-ish. Sometimes I run over. But again, I want to thank you all for being here. It's an honor that you take time out of your week and day just to spend time with me and listen to what I have to say. Once again, thank you. This is the Conservative Corner. I'm Seth Eisenberg. And if you live your life by a set of principles as opposed to a party, you're going to live a pretty good life and have something to look back on and be proud of. I will see you all next Wednesday at 8 on the Pulse. Have a good evening, a good week, and try to have a good evening.